Across the storm-whipped coasts and frozen farmlands of medieval northern Europe, a quiet plant shaped daily survival in ways most people never thought about. Flax grew low to the ground, simple and humble, that it gave communities three priceless gifts: strong fibers for linen, nourishing seeds for food, and above all, a golden oil that became the backbone of everyday life. In lands stretching from the Baltic shores to the gray waters of the North Sea, winters were long and cruel. Skies stayed dim for weeks, and everything made of wood slowly decayed under moisture and frost. In that harsh world, flaxseed oil was not a luxury. It was a necessity, woven into cooking, lighting, healing, trade, and survival itself. In southern Europe, people relied on olives for their oil, but in the cold north, olive trees could not live. The soil was too cold, the summers too short, and the frost too deadly. Animal fats, though common, brought their own problems. In summer, they turned soft and ran like water. In winter, they hardened into usable blocks. Worse, they spoiled easily and carried strong smells when stored too long. Flax was different. It thrived in cool, wet ground and matured quickly, fitting perfectly into the short northern growing season. Every village could grow it, harvest it, and press it. This meant families did not have to rely on long, dangerous trade routes for oil. They could make it themselves, close to home, year after year. Flaxseed oil also proved far more stable than butter, cream, or animal oils. In rough wooden huts and simple storage sheds, dairy fats often turned sour before winter had even begun. Flaxseed oil held its form. It did not split apart easily. It stayed thick and usable even as frost covered the fields outside. Its slow-drying, dense nature made it reliable when everything else failed. Families could store clay jars of the oil on shelves or buried in cool ground and return to them again and again without fear of waste. In a climate where survival depended on preservation, this one quality alone made flaxseed oil priceless. When winter settled in fully, food became a daily struggle. Grain stores shrank, root vegetables disappeared, and fresh greens became nothing but a memory. Meat was rare, and animal fats were often kept by wealthier families or landlords. Flaxseed oil filled that gap. It offered heavy, rich energy in small amounts. A single spoon stirred into thin grain porridge made the meal more filling and warming. It was poured over dense rye bread or mixed into simple stews made from whatever scraps remained. During religious fasting, especially during long Lenten periods when butter, eggs, and meat were forbidden, flaxseed oil became even more valuable. It replaced forbidden fats and kept people from weakening during hard labor and prayer. During the dangerous hunger period known as the Spring Gap, the oil became even more important. This was the time when old food stores were nearly gone and the new crops were still months away. Families survived on whatever could be stretched the furthest. Flaxseed oil, because it could be stored through winter without spoiling, acted as a bridge between scarcity and renewal. Even monasteries and religious communities leaned heavily on it during these months. They mixed it into thin meals and relied on its steady energy to keep daily work and worship alive. It was not treated as a luxury item. It was seen as a quiet support, a silent strength that kept bodies moving when everything else was in short supply. In the world of textiles, flaxseed oil and linen lived side by side. Linen was one of the most important fabrics in Northern Europe. People slept on it, wore it, wrapped themselves in it, and used it for sails, sacks, and work clothing. Yet flax fibers were hard, dry, and stubborn. When spinners tried to twist completely dry fibers, they snapped easily, tangled fast, and tore the skin from tired hands. A thin touch of flaxseed oil changed everything. Women and men who worked at spinning wheels kept small containers of oil nearby. They rubbed it lightly onto fibers, softening them, making them bend and twist smoothly into strong thread. Inside guild workshops, the oil had a permanent place. It lubricated spindles, eased wooden parts of looms, and reduced the number of broken threads during long work hours. Weavers depended on that simple liquid to keep production steady. After the cloth was woven, certain types of linen were treated again with the oil. Heavy-duty fabrics, like ship sails, grain sacks, and work cloth, were brushed with thin layers to add strength and slight water resistance. This did not make them waterproof, but it made them tougher, longer lasting, and better suited for northern weather. Without flaxseed oil, the entire linen industry would have moved slower, broken more often, and produced weaker cloth. As winter winds howled across fields and salt air swept inland from the sea, wood remained the backbone of daily life. Houses, barns, fences, wagons, plows, barrels, and tools were all made from timber. But constant dampness caused wood to rot quickly. Simple rain and melting frost soaked into surfaces, swelling the grain and weakening joints. Flaxseed oil offered a natural shield. Unlike animal fats, which sat on the surface and turned sticky, this oil soaked deep into the wood. It filled tiny cracks and fibers, blocking water from creeping inside. Carpenters spread it across doors, chests, tool handles, and wooden pegs, knowing it would protect them far longer than untreated wood. Along the coasts, boat builders trusted nothing more than linseed oil. Fishing boats, oars, planks, and hulls faced endless contact with icy water and salty wind. The oil's slow-drying nature allowed it to sink deep before forming a protective layer. This prevented splitting in freezing temperatures and reduced warping during seasonal thaw. Barrels treated with the oil kept their shape longer, resisting leaks and decay. In a society where replacing wood required days of labor and valuable trees, flaxseed oil acted as a silent guardian. It preserved the wooden world people depended on, strengthening every board, handle, and beam in daily life. In the quiet stone halls of medieval northern monasteries and the timbered workshops of growing towns, flaxseed oil moved into a world of color, craft, and careful hands. It was no longer only a food or a household necessity. It became a foundation for art itself. In cold, shattered rooms where candles flickered against stone walls, scribes and illuminators opened handmade books and began their delicate work. Dry pigments alone could not cling to parchment. They cracked, flaked, and faded without help. Linseed oil gave them life. It was mixed slowly into powdered minerals and crushed plants, turning dull dust into smooth, living color that flowed across the page. Illuminators dipped fine brushes into this mixture and guided it along the skins of treated calf parchment. Blues deep as winter shadows, reds like fresh blood, and soft glowing golds spread smoothly instead of breaking apart. Because the oil dried slowly, the artists had time. They could adjust a line, soften a shadow, or blend brighter tones into darker edges. This patience shaped the look of Northern European religious art. The pages of prayer books and biblical texts began to glow with a depth and richness that had not existed before. These were not rushed images. They were built carefully, breath by breath, stroke by stroke, guided by the slow, forgiving nature of flaxseed oil. In panel painting, the same oil transformed wooden boards into lasting works of devotion. Artists began by sealing raw wood with thin layers of warmed linseed oil. This stopped moisture from creeping into the grain and warping the surface. Without this step, damp northern air would quickly crack paint and destroy the image. Once sealed, The panel became a stable skin on which colors could live. Pigments bound with flaxseed oil formed the smooth paste. Painters layered this slowly, building soft transitions between light and shadow that had been impossible in older methods. The look of more than religious art changed completely because of this process. Faces became gentler, folds of cloth more lifelike, and the light in painted eyes more real. Altar panels, devotional icons, and early portraits relied on linseed oil, not only to hold pigment, but also to protect the image itself. Even centuries later, the reason many of these works still survive is because the oil formed a protective skin over wood and color alike. It was never praised openly, but without it, much of medieval northern art would not exist in the way we know it today. Beyond workshops and churches, flaxseed oil also found a firm place in the world of medicine. In villages and towns, trained physicians and wise herbalists valued it as both a soothing agent and a healing carrier. The cold climate brought aching joints, stiff muscles, and swollen limbs. Linseed oil, when gently warmed, was rubbed directly into sore areas. It softened the skin and allowed heat and herbs to pass more deeply into the body. In a time when pain relief was rare, this simple oil brought real comfort. Apothecaries often blended the oil with crushed herbs, such as chamomile and rosemary. The thick golden liquid absorbed their properties and made them easier to spread. For burns and raw skin, it acted as a barrier, sealing in moisture while keeping out dirt and infection. Its mild nature made it safer than animal ointments, which could spoil quickly and cause irritation. Families kept small bottles of it in their homes, treating cuts, cracked hands, and winter-damaged skin with gentle care that came directly from the flax plant. Midwives also depended on flaxseed oil for its gentleness. During childbirth, when medicine was crude and danger was real, the oil was used to reduce tearing and discomfort. It made difficult moments slightly safer. It did not burn. It did not sting. It soothed and eased rather than harmed. In a world where women had few comforts in childbirth, this small use of oil could change the experience greatly. It became part of quiet knowledge passed from generation to generation, rarely written down, but deeply trusted. When illness entered a household, flaxseed oil also became a form of internal comfort. A small amount added to warm porridge or blended into herbal drinks helped bring strength back to weak bodies. The oil did not cure disease, but it provided energy and warmth when appetite was low. Thin soups were made richer with a careful pour of it. For coughing, fever, or deep fatigue, it was one of the only fats a family could safely store and use without fear of spoilage. Its reliability made it a steady companion during sickness. As winter nights grew long, darkness became a challenge just as serious as hunger. In northern lands, the sun slipped below the horizon early and sometimes did not return for many hours each day. People could not afford to waste light. Flaxseed oil once again filled the need. Simple lamps made of clay, carved stone, or thin metal plates were filled with the oil. A twisted linen wick, often made from scraps of old cloth, rested inside. When lit, the flame burned steady and cleaner than animal fats could offer. Animal fat lamps smoked heavily and filled rooms with bitter smells. The soot coated walls, books, and lungs. Linseed oil burned with a calmer flame. It gave enough light to spin thread, mend tools, prepare meals, and guide prayer. In peasant huts, it allowed families to survive the long night hours with some sense of normal life. In workshops, it extended working hours. allowing craftsmen to meet demands during dark winter months. Monasteries depended heavily on these oil lamps. In long script rooms known as scriptoria, monks copied books and sacred texts far into the night. Without steady lamplight, their work would have been impossible. The queen burning of flaxseed oil protected the pages from thick soot stains and reduced fire risk compared to open torches. In growing towns, night watchmen carried small oil lamps as they walked narrow streets. The glow offered a fragile sense of safety, helping them see doors, windows, and shadowed alleys. Even when icy cold pressed in and other fuels failed, flaxseed oil remained usable. It did not freeze solid like animal fats. It did not separate. Stored properly, it stayed ready through the worst months of winter. In a world wrapped in near-constant darkness during certain seasons, this oil became more than just fuel. It became light itself, giving people the ability to work, read, pray, and endure long hours when the sun felt like a distant memory. By the high Middle Ages, flaxseed oil had moved far beyond village kitchens and local workshops. It had become a vital force in trade, shaping the wealth and survival of entire regions. Across the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, great port cities rose to prominence because of this golden liquid. Places like Riga, Tallinn, and Gansk turned their fields into seas of flax and their docks into centers of oil trade. The harvest was no longer only a family task. It became an organized industry. Farmers grew flax not just for their own survival, but for distant markets and foreign demand. Press houses sprang up near rivers and harbors, where massive wooden beams and stone weights crushed seeds day and night, squeezing out oil in steady streams. The Hansa trade network tied these cities together. Long, narrow ships loaded with wooden barrels of freshly pressed linseed oil cut through icy waters toward Germany, Scandinavia, and the British Isles. The barrels were sealed tightly with wax and pitch, marked with carved symbols showing their origin and quality. Dock workers rolled them across wooden piers, polished smooth from years of labor. Merchants in fur-lined coats examined seals, tested samples, and recorded shipments in heavy leather-bound books. The oil was no longer simply a household supply. It had become a commodity that powered economies, funded city growth, and strengthened international connections across the northern seas. With this rise in importance came control. Town guilds recognized that flaxseed oil was too vital to be left unregulated. They enforced strict rules about how seeds were harvested, how oil was pressed, and how it was stored. Bad oil could damage wood, ruin cloth, spoil artwork, and extinguish lamps. To prevent this, guild inspectors visited press houses, checking the color, thickness, and smell of each batch. Only oil that met their standards could be sold in official markets. Pressers who cheated by mixing in water or using rotten seeds faced heavy fines or loss of their trade rights. These rules protected buyers, but they also raised the status of the oil itself. It was no longer seen as a simple farm product, but as a craft requiring skill, discipline, and honesty. The trade of flaxseed oil was deeply tied to the rhythm of the seasons. A wet summer could rot crops in the field. A dry spring could weaken the harvest. When yields fell, prices rose sharply. A single bad year could send shockwaves through rural villages and wealthy towns alike. Families who depended on flax for their income felt these changes immediately. When harvests were strong, prosperity spread. When they failed, hunger and debt followed. The oil became a mirror of the land's health, reflecting every change in weather, soil, and political stability. Port cities grew around this trade. Warehouses lined the harbors, built from heavy timber and stone, filled with the smell of pressed seeds and drying wood. Workers poured oil into waiting barrels while scribes carved numbers and marks into wooden tags. Guards stood watch to prevent theft. Even taxation connected to flax became common. Some towns built special markets where flax products were bought and sold under strict supervision. Oil was taxed, counted, weighed, and tracked. Its value helped fund walls, churches, roads, and defenses. It gave shape to the skeleton of growing northern cities. Even with oils traveling farther than ever before, households and craftsmen still constantly compared flaxseed oil to every alternative available. Olive oil remained praised in distant southern lands, but in the north, it arrived in small, expensive quantities after long journeys by sea and land. It was seen as a luxury, reserved for rich households or powerful monasteries with strong trade ties. It was not something ordinary families could rely on. Animal fats, more common, continued to struggle with the same problems they always had. They smoked heavily in lamps, spoiled quickly without heavy salt, and turned either too soft or too hard depending on the season. Other plant oils existed, but none offered the same balance. Walnut and hemp oil required delicate growing conditions and produced smaller harvests. Poppy oil was valued but difficult to produce in large quantities. All of them remained limited in supply, which kept their prices high. Flaxseed oil stood apart because of one simple truth. It grew well where people lived. It could be pressed without complicated equipment. It could be stored without constant fear of spoilage. It could be used in homes, workshops, churches, and ships. No other oil fits so perfectly into every part of life. Another key fact lay in its behavior during cold weather. In warmer regions, its slow-drying nature could be seen as a flaw. In the north, it was an advantage. Craftsmen could work longer with it. Woodworkers had time to spread it evenly across surfaces. Painters could blend colors slowly without rushing. This gave northern craftsmanship a distinct character. Surfaces were smoother, paintings were softer, finishes lasted longer. The climate itself turned flaxseed oil's slow nature into a strength. By now, flaxseed oil was no longer just part of survival. It had become part of identity. From tiny rural villages to crowded port cities, from quiet monasteries to warring shipyards, the oil flowed through daily life like a hidden bloodstream. It connected farmer and merchant, craftsman and sailor, monk and peasant. Every spoon stirred into porridge, every beam brushed with oil, every lamp lit at night, carried within it the silent work of countless hands across the northern world. The final truth about flaxseed oil in medieval northern Europe was not found in dramatic battles or royal courts. It was found in daily repetition, in the steady rhythm of pressing seeds, in the careful sealing of barrels, in the quiet hands of spinners, healers, painters, and carpenters. It was found in storms and harvests, in hunger and survival, in darkness and light. This simple golden liquid did not shout its importance. It proved it slowly, over centuries, through reliability and trust. Without it, the fragile web of northern life would have unraveled far more often and far more quickly than history ever recorded. By the end of the 15th century, flaxseed oil was no longer just a simple household substance. It had become a quiet force that shaped survival itself. Across villages, towns, and distant ports, its presence was rarely spoken of, yet its absence was deeply feared. People did not worship it. They did not celebrate it in festivals. They simply depended on it in their food, their tools, their homes, and the fragile warmth of their lamps. When the cold winds howled through wooden walls and the last light of winter trembled in tiny flames, it was this humble oil that kept darkness at bay. In a world without machines or modern comforts, Survival was built not on noise and power, but on slow-burning, persistent necessities. Over time, knowledge of the soil passed silently from one generation to the next. Fathers showed sons how to crush the seeds. Mothers taught daughters how to store it safely away from rot and frost. Craftsmen learned how to mix it with pigments to preserve color against time, and shipbuilders learned to coat their vessels so they would not be destroyed by the sea. This was not written in grand books. It was not recorded in kingly archives. It was taught by hands, remembered by eyes, and carried by instinct. The world moved forward, not because of glory, but because of quiet skills repeated again and again until they became tradition. Yet, history almost forgot this story. Wars, plagues, and revolutions thundered louder in the records of the past. The silent lifelines, the oils, the grains, the hidden crafts were left in the shadows of memory. But when we look back closely, we begin to see the truth. Great empires did not only rise by the sword or fall by the crown. They survived because of small, patient forces working in the background. Behind every painted masterpiece, every floating ship, every table where a family gathered for warmth, there was a thin golden thread connecting them to a single source of quiet strength. Today, we live surrounded by conveniences born from chemistry and machines, but the foundation was laid by hands stained with seed oil and minds shaped by patience. The story of flaxseed oil is not just a story of a substance. It is the story of endurance itself. It is the proof that sometimes the most powerful forces in history are the ones that make no sound, leave no monument, and demand no recognition, yet hold entire civilizations together in their invisible grip.